So now we're going to take a look at probably the most enigmatic contender in this year's Derby, Forever Young, the Japanese import, been much ballyhooed, and we've only had really the races, the Saudi Derby and the UAE Derby visually to take a look at. But let's do a deeper dive and see what we can find. Certainly, Yoshido Yahagi, I know, is a very vaunted trainer throughout internationally. And you see this horse is 5 for 5 with a first in the UAE Derby as well as the Saudi Derby. And having watched both, visually was pretty impressive. But let's see what we can find when we look a little deeper. First thing we take a look at is the pedigree. And you see the sire is Real Steel, and he is by Deep Impact and Sunday Silence. And Deep Impact has been a very prominent sire in Japan, and that is the leading bloodline on the sire side. So we have to like that. Excuse me. You look at the dosage profile, and you see, again, no stamina influences, and the DI is 3 with a center distribution of 0.83. So there's good balance between speed and stamina, and the GSV is pretty good at 54.28 in comparison to the rest of the field here. So that's not a concern. We look down at the conduit mare profile, and as we know, the Japanese do like to breed for stamina, and Forever Darling is a black type mare, and she has a little bit more stamina than speed. So I don't think the distance will be a problem. This horse just ran at 1 mile and 3/16 without difficulty, so we're not going to worry about that. You've got AP Indy on the bottom there, so I don't think that's a problem at all. Now we look at obviously, these are going to be very foreign to most of us because the most get are Japanese, but I did list them for your reference if you want to take a look at them. But again, knowing how the Japanese breed for speed and stamina, I'll believe, or stamina primarily, I'll believe that Forever Young is going to be competitive here and has already shown a commensurate amount of class, I think. It is a question whether or not he stacks up with our 3-year-olds, but on the face right now, I would say he does. Looking at the female get, I looked into all of these, and the mares are unraced, so there's not a lot to go on. I do believe one of them, Dan and My Soul, was kind of a career maiden. That's not too big a deal. I mean, this happens. They struck gold with Forever Young. So from the mare, from the female get, we can't get a lot of reference stakes winners or whatnot. But Forever Young comes from quality bloodlines, so I don't think we have a problem there. Now we take a look at the races, and obviously the last two, the UAE Derby and the Saudi Derby, are the ones we're going to pay particular interest to. But visually, watching both of those races, I was very impressed with Forever Young. So let's take a look at them again and see what we find. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is the Saudi Derby, and Forever Young is in the maroon silks.
At the 1600 meters, the Saudi Derby.
And he's outside there to the left, and you see he's hustling a bit out there. I don't know if that was the sharpest of breaks, but pretty good and carried wide.
One of the first to show. Also moving forward in the early stages.
Had to do a lot of mathematics to come up with the pace numbers, and I'll stress that they are approximations on my part. We had to convert the metrics and kilometers per hour, a lot of different stuff, but I think it gives us a pretty good frame of reference of how Forever Young compares. See, he gets carried wide, and he's about 4 out and about maybe 5-6 back at this point, but he's keen to get in there, get involved.
Setup who has the lead from Bentonato in second, Buckham Dano in third. Now Forever Young begins a sweeping
He's in
move
pretty good shape right here.
Ajwadi as they make their way with Hayat as they straighten. Bentonato the first one to commit behind these Buckham Dano.
Bentonato is more of a 7 furlongs horse, but he's no slouch. Buckham Dano is a pretty darn good horse too. So these were some good sprinter miles he was facing. And for your information, this isn't quite a mile. It's just about, but not quite. But you see right here, he's kicking it in, and he looks hopelessly beaten at the top of the stretch, and yet he just won't quit. And this is a horse who really loves to win and likes to fight. So you have to be impressed with that for sure. So now we'll take a look at the UAE Derby, and this was where I got pretty excited about Forever Young. And you see he's parked out on the 11 hole.
Has a look at them, likes them, and hits the lever. We are underway in the UAE.
And this was, keep in mind that this was a pretty speed favoring track. A Laurel River won from wire to wire in the Dubai World Cup, and basically anything on the inside that got speed was gold. It was a golden rail. So you have to keep that in mind. And that was very speed favoring. So Forever Young's carried. He's about maybe 4 lengths back here. And they always seem to keep him wide, and I guess, from what I understand, the reason is they like to avoid kickback with him, which is also, of course, a little bit of a concern in the Derby. There's no doubt going to be some. But, so this is a mile and 3/16, but he probably runs closer to a mile and a quarter, given the trip he got.
To the fence here from Autobahn in second. Then came Mendelssohn Bay, sliding up Guns and Glory. Forever Young, the international market favourite, has been no better than 3 deep and punching the breeze the entire way so far. Then came Pandagate, Navy Seal opting to get on the right horses back here. Then came Ballon d'Or from Rockwalk, and dropping away Henry Adams, who's getting further away.
He's in good position. If he's good enough, there's really no excuses.
And up in front, up on the running rail, Oasis Boy leads a narrow margin. Autobahn goes up to apply a bit of pressure. Forever Young still travelling despite being deep as they make their way into the home stretch here in the UAE Derby. Then came Mendelssohn Bay, deeper out.
This is where I really got excited because, again, there was a very speed favoring track, and he closed into a bias and really turned on the jets here. You see nobody else is close. I mean, just a really, really big turn of foot. This is just a horse, again, he's got grit and really likes to win. Gotta love that.
Here in the late stages, and it's another Japan domination in the UAE Derby. Autobahn very brave in second.
You see that time, 1:57.89, kind of slow for a mile and 3/16. Another thing to be thinking about. But this is a pretty darn good horse visually from what we've seen.
And the last one home, Henry Adams, who was pulled out of the contest.
So we've watched the races. Now let's take a look at the pace study. Now I'm going to give you a couple of disclaimers, as I often do when it comes to foreign horses. These were all in metrics, so I had to convert them over and do a fair amount of math to come up with these type of approximations, converting kilometers to miles per hour, and also just estimating the fractions. Their fractions are obviously a little different because they're based on meters, but we got as close as we could, and I think this gives us a pretty good approximation for how Forever Young will run. The first we'll look at is the Saudi Derby, and that was at about a mile, not quite. So the fractions are markedly different than the UAE Derby, and you'll see that Forever Young stayed about 4 back, and he was at roughly a pretty decent, pretty average, standard type of mile fractions for a horse who likes to rate, I'd say. And so I had it, I think, I'm just taking a look at my notes here. I think I had it coming out at 47-1 they were running at, and Forever Young came out at about 48 flat, 48-1, pretty close to that for the Saudi Derby. The second call, you see some deceleration, and obviously it tells me a couple of things. They were moving pretty good on the front end. That's usually what happens when you see the fractions decrease like this, for them anyway. I had the second fraction coming in at approximately 24-3 for the leaders, and for Forever Young it was at 25-1. So that's pretty slow for a second fraction. And then finally, that third fraction, it just drops way off at 48.24 feet per second, and that just will not cut it for the Derby. That's a little alarming. So this is why, seeing the pace is compared to watching visually, it really can make a difference. And you can't get terribly excited about this race, despite the fact that it was a very game and competitive effort by Forever Young to get up and win it. That wasn't a very the times there are really not terribly solid. So you can't get really jazzed about it. I think I had the final quarter was 27 and almost 27-2, which is arctically slow. So that's not a race to get really excited about it. Now you have some question marks about Forever Young. So we go to the UAE Derby, and I'll say again, these are approximations, and this is based on metric conversion and kilometers per hour conversion. And one of these days they'll figure out to put the fractions as we like them up there. But you see the first fraction where Forever Young rated just off the pace, and at the half-mile mark he was at 54 and 81, which is pretty good. Certainly a lot better than, or 52.85, I apologize. Kind of understandable for a mile and 3/16, and it was speed favoring, and the front runner, Autobahn, was walking the dog a little bit on the front end, so that's not terribly surprising. And I had the first fraction was at 49 and 1 approximately. So Forever Young was at was about 50, was roughly the first call. The second call, obviously, they really settled in, and Autobahn just slowed it down to a crawl. So consequently, Forever Young rating just off of that at 49.81. I really wasn't asked and didn't really have to be. So I'm not going to hold that terribly much against him, but it was a 26 flat final quarter. Forever Young went 26 and 2 roughly, and it was it was pretty slow. Now, the final fraction, obviously they picked it well up. And because they went so pretty slow on the front end, of course, they're going to be moving a hell of a lot more. And Forever Young displayed a really big kick, had plenty left in the tank to get a 55.74. Now, obviously, with quicker fractions, I wouldn't expect him to run that way. But it does show you that he had plenty in the tank. And it also shows you that that the distance is within his realm when you consider, in particular, he was wide all the way around the track. So he probably ran like a mile and, like a mile and a quarter, a mile and 5/16, something like that in total, and still had plenty left in the tank. So to me, that was very promising. However, I will say this, visually, it looks a lot better than when you take a look at these pace numbers. So we go down to our EP, AP, and SP, and you see 49.81 is markedly lower than our other top contenders so far, as well as the average pace and sustained pace are not very good by comparison either. So did this answer some questions for us about Forever Young? To a degree. I think maybe I'm not quite as excited about him as I was before. He certainly will get the distance. I think he will be up amongst the pace, which should be kind of quick, and that gives me a little concern about whether or not he can finish. But again, I do like the grit of this horse and how competitive he is, and sometimes that can make a difference, and maybe he can raise his game by facing better competition. But this pace study was it was a little alarming to me, and I would probably have to downgrade Forever Young, in my eyes anyway, after taking a look at this. So when you have our issues and concerns, we got some considerable ones. Number one, of course, is competition. Can he measure up with our 3-year-olds? And based on the pace numbers, it's a tough ask. That UAE Derby looked a lot better visually than it does on paper. Certainly he'll have to work out a trip, and the post is going to mean a lot. He is definitely going to have to get out and free of trouble. As you see, they always keep him wide to avoid kickback, and certainly that's going to be a big problem in the Derby as well. And then, of course, can he handle Churchill Downs? We just don't know. He is in the States now in training, so we'll see what we get out of that. But I would, based upon what I've seen in this evaluation, I don't think the distance is going to be a problem. I think class is a very big issue, and pace certainly seems to be possibly an issue as well. So for me, I am not nearly as excited as I was about Forever Young, and he would definitely have to be downgraded as a Derby contender at this point.